A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons, respectively the fourth and the fifth book in the A Song of Ice and Fire franchise, were originally supposed to be one book. It had to be split into two, due to its length, and one thing that George R.R. Martin regrets about it is that he could not contrast the characters of Cersei Lannister and Daenerys Targaryen directly. This might come as a surprise, since way too often Daenerys and Cersei are treated as if they are the same. Two crazy, tyrannical, paranoid mad queens obsessed with fire and ready to slaughter everyone who does not worship the ground they walk on. Most also predict them to have identical endings, both going crazy with power and killed by their heroic, righteous, intimate partners to save the world from their tyranny. Yet these words by George R.R. Martin prove that Daenerys and Cersei are not and have never been identical characters. In fact, they are meant to be analyzed as opposites, perfect foils for one another, exploring various ways in which a woman in a world such as the world of Azoyav would hold power. As always, before we start, remember that if you like my content, remember to leave a like, subscribe and share so that more people can see it. Make sure to click the notification button so that you never miss a new video. Cersei was born to Tywin and Joanna Lannister, an identical twin to her brother Jaime. Cersei was the older twin, which means that if it wasn't for the misogynistic laws of Westeros, she would be the one to inherit Casterly Rock. When Cersei was a child, she and Jaime were so similar that they would often switch clothes, and Cersei would notice how differently she was treated when she was taken for Jaime. Jaime was the heir to Casterly Rock, taught how to fight with a sword and how to rule, whereas Cersei, since her earliest days, knew that her womanhood severely impacted her potential to access and hold power in her own right. It was in childhood when Cersei and Jaime had developed incestuous love for one another, one that was inherently toxic and narcissistic because both of them saw each other in their respective twin. Both Jaime and Cersei think that had they been born as the opposite gender, they would be each other. Cersei was not always only in love with Jaime though. Her father had intended for her to be married to Rhaegar Targaryen, son of King Aerys and his heir, making her the queen of the Seven Kingdoms in the process. Cersei got infatuated with Rhaegar once she met him. Shortly before the betrothal was to be announced, Cersei and her friend Melara Heatherspoon visited a woods witch who told Cersei the prophecy that would come to haunt her for the rest of her life. Maggie the Frog had predicted that Cersei will marry a king. She will have 3 children while he will have 16. She will outlive all of her offspring, she will be defeated by a younger and a more beautiful queen, and eventually she will be killed by the Valonqar, which translates to little brother. Cersei assumed that she will marry Rhaegar after he already was a king and that the Valonqar is Tyrion, her youngest brother. Maggie also predicted that Melara will die quickly, and indeed, Melara died that very night. It is implied that it was Cersei who killed the girl. Cersei's hopes for marrying Rhaegar were squandered. Aerys Targaryen refused the match between Rhaegar and Cersei. Nevertheless, Tywin took Cersei to the royal court, hoping that maybe she could be married to Viserys, and she and Jaime were separated. In order to keep her twin close to her, she convinced him to join the Kingsguard. At that time, the plan seemed brilliant and Jaime agreed, but Cersei did not know how much the relations between Tywin and Aerys had deteriorated, and Tywin will see this as Aerys robbing Tywin of his heir. When Jaime was admitted to the Kingsguard, Tywin resigned as Hand and returned to Casterly Rock, taking Cersei with him, thus once again separating the twins. After the conclusion of Robert's rebellion, a marriage between Cersei and Robert was arranged, and thus Cersei became the Queen of the Seven Kingdoms as originally intended. Initially infatuated with Robert, all of her enthusiasm died out when Robert called her Lyanna during their wedding night. The marriage quickly turned out to be an unhappy one. Cersei and Robert grew to despise each other, and Cersei resumed relations with Jaime, who, as a member of Kingsguard, was always nearby. She bore him 3 children that she successfully passed off as Robert's. At some point, Cersei did become pregnant by Robert, but had an abortion. Robert also raped her on several occasions when he was drunk, physically hurting her in the process. Robert would pretend to not remember what he did, but Cersei believed that he knew the truth, but simply did not want to face it. Robert was also physically abusive to her on at least 2 occasions. Stannis Baratheon and Jon Arryn eventually grew suspicious of Cersei once they realized that all of Robert's bastards that they knew of had Robert's Baratheon look, black hair and blue eyes, while all of Cersei's children had a classical Lannister look, green eyes and blonde hair. Jon Arryn was poisoned and died before he could uncover the truth, with Stannis believing that Cersei was responsible, but she was actually innocent. Cersei eventually arranged for Robert to be killed during a hunt, and as such, she ascended as Joffrey's Queen Regent until he comes of age. Daenerys Targaryen was born on Dragonstone, after Robert's rebellion was already over. Robert was accepted as a new ruler. Aerys, Rhaegar, Elia, Aegon and Rhaenys were all dead, and Dragonstone was the only remaining Targaryen stronghold. Rhaella crowned Viserys as Aerys' heir, with Daenerys receiving the title of Princess of Dragonstone as his heir. Rhaella died shortly after giving birth to Daenerys, and Stannis launched an assault on Dragonstone. Daenerys alongside Viserys would have probably been given to Robert and killed if they weren't smuggled out of Dragonstone by Sir Willem Darry. They lived in Braavos for several years, but after Willem Darry got sick and died, they were expelled from the house they lived in, the house with the red door with the lemon tree that Daenerys remembers as her only true home. They then wandered the Free Cities for years, never staying long in any of them, afraid of Robert's assassins. At first the wealthy men of Essos were welcoming the last Targaryens, but eventually they lost interest, and in order to survive, the children had to sell their last remaining treasures, including Rhaella's crown, which caused Viserys to lose any remaining bits of joy. Viserys had once tried to convince the Golden Company to take their cause, but was laughed at, since the Golden Company hated the Targaryens. The relationship between Daenerys and Viserys was once a loving one, but it kept deteriorating further and further, and Dany became a frequent target of his frustrations, resulting in physical and mental abuse. Much like Cersei blamed Tyrion for the death of her mother Joanna, Viserys never forgave Dany for the death of Rhaella. Daenerys grew up believing that she will marry Viserys when she comes of age. At some point, Viserys and Daenerys took refuge in Illyrio Mopatis's house in Pentos. They have lived with him for about half a year, with Illyrio eventually arranging a marriage between Khal Drogo and Daenerys, promising Viserys that Drogo's Khalasar will help him reclaim the stolen throne. That Viserys agreed to this is of course a sign of his ignorance, since no Dothraki has ever crossed the sea, but the marriage did come to fruition. The day before the ceremony, Viserys wanted to claim Daenerys' virginity, but was prevented by forward-thinking Illyrio. Dany and Cersei both come to become rulers, but the way they achieve this and how they exercise power are in stark contrast. Cersei's ascension to power was the result of years of political machinations. After the Lannisters sided with the rebels one last moment, Cersei became a queen consort to Robert. In Westeros, that position does not give anyone a lot of power, but after arranging Robert's death, she becomes a queen regent to Joffrey until he comes of age. That position is heavily undermined by Joffrey's hands, respectively Tyrion and Tywin, but both of them get removed from the picture, and the power vacuum finally lets Cersei take all the power for herself as queen regent again. Cersei's mistakes in King's Landing caused her to lose all of the power, but her uncle's death in the epilogue of A Dance with Dragons once again leaves a power vacuum that she will definitely exploit. Dany is sold as a bridal slave to Drogo, and while she eventually grows to have some power under him and does assimilate into his culture, she still considers herself to have been a victim of bridal slavery, even a long time after his death, and even after she fell in love with him. Daenerys gets stripped of everything after Drogo dies, proving that her power always relied on him, but then gains power by waking dragons out of stone, thus finally becoming a queen in her own right. With the help of said dragons, Dany decides to reclaim the throne, considering this to be her duty as the last Targaryen, but on her way to Westeros, she encounters something she wants to change: slavery. She conquers 3 slaver cities and decides to rule one of them, not wishing to abandon the newly freed slaves to a terrible fate. It's important to note that Drogo's remaining Kalasar has chosen Dany as their new ruler, as did the freedmen in Snaver's Bay. It's interesting to note that Cersei's first chapter in A Feast for Crows and Daenerys' first chapter in A Dance with Dragons both start with them being woken up because of a shocking event. Cersei wakes up to Tywin being found dead, whereas Dany is woken up because one of her Unsullied was slain. This is the dream Cersei has before she wakes up. She dreamed she sat the Iron Throne, high above them all. The courtiers were brightly colored mice below. Great lords and proud ladies knelt before her. Bold young knights laid their swords at her feet and pleaded for her favors, and the queen smiled down at them, until the dwarf appeared as if from nowhere, pointing at her and howling with laughter. The lords and ladies began to chuckle too, hiding their smiles behind their hands. Only then did the queen realize she was naked. Horrified, she tried to cover herself with her hands. The barbs and blades of the Iron Throne bit into her flesh as she crouched to hide her shame. Blood ran red down her legs as steel teeth gnawed at her buttocks. When she tried to stand, her foot slipped through a gap in the twisted metal. The more she struggled and more the throne engulfed her, tearing chunks of flesh from her breasts and belly, slicing at her arms and legs until they were sleek and red, glistering. And all the while her brother capered below, laughing. His merriment still echoed in her ears when she felt a light touch on her shoulder and woke suddenly. When Daenerys was woken up, she dreamt of the house with the red door, the one that she lost when she had to flee from Braavos. What they dream about reveals their fundamental ambitions and desires. Cersei dreams of sitting on the throne, high above them all, because this is what she wants, to sit on the throne by herself with all the power in her hands. Daenerys dreams of a place representing the most stable moments of her life, because this is what she wants: a home, a stable, simple life. Later in that chapter we learn that when Daenerys holds court, she sits on a simple wooden bench and not some elaborate throne, which is an additional contrast from Cersei, who wants to sit on the Iron Throne above everyone else. Yet Cersei never quite gets to sit on that throne, while Daenerys does get to rule in her own right. There is an interesting anecdote about that. Mark Simonetti is the author of several official artworks for A Song of Ice and Fire, even drawing the official cover for the Brazilian edition of A Dance with Dragons. Initially, the project looked a bit different. Daenerys was at the very top of the staircase, but after Mark consulted it with George R.R. Martin, he asked him to move her lower, saying that it fits better since Daenerys wants equality for everyone and wishes to be at the same level as her people. Cersei and Daenerys' philosophies of ruling are opposite of each other. Cersei believes that in the world that she lives in, there is no place for weakness. In this world, the weak are always the victim of the strong. It is Cersei's duty as a queen to not only hold power but also protect her subjects, which she never does. On the other hand, Dany believes that kings and queens are responsible for the most powerless elements of society. Why do the gods make the queens and queens, if not to protect the ones who can't protect themselves? Both the queens put their beliefs into practice, not caring about the fate of the common folk. Cersei does nothing to help the refugees in King's Landing. "High Holiness," she said, "these sparrows are frightening the city. I want them gone." "Where should they go, your grace?" "There are 7 hells. Any of them will serve. Back where they came from, I would imagine." But Dany tends to the sick refugees herself. Sir Barristan watched with ill-concealed apprehension. "You should not linger here over long, your grace. The Astapori are being fed as you commanded. There's no more we can do for the poor wretches. We should repair back to the city." "Go if you wish, sir. I will not detain you." "I will not detain any of you." Dany vaulted down from the horse. "I cannot heal them, but I can show them that their mother cares." Drogo sucked in his breath. "Khaleesi, no." The bell in his braid rang softly as he dismounted. "You must not get any closer. Do not let them touch you. Do not." Dany walked right past him. There was an old man on the ground a few feet away, moaning and staring up at the grey belly of the clouds. She knelt beside him, wrinkling her nose at the smell, and pushed back his dirty grey hair to feel his brow. "His flesh is on fire. I need water to bathe him. Sea water will serve. Marcellan, will you fetch some for me? I need oil as well for the pyre. Who will help me burn the dead? The actions of the two queens result in fierce hatred and fierce love. Cersei is widely hated by the common people. Halfway along the route, a wailing woman forced her wail between two watchmen and ran out into the street in front of the king and his companions, holding the corpse of her dead baby above her head. It was blue and swollen, grotesque, but the real horror was the mother's eyes. Leave her, your grace, Cersei called out to the king. She's beyond our help, poor thing. The mother heard her. Somehow the queen's voice cut through the woman's ravaged wits. Her slack face twisted in loathing. Whore, she shrieked. Kingslayer's whore. Brotherfucker. Her dead child dropped from her arms like a sack of flour as she pointed at Cersei. Brotherfucker, brotherfucker, brotherfucker. The shouting seemed louder here than on the plaza, perhaps because the mob was so much closer. Whore and sinner were most common, but brotherfucker and cunt and traitor were flung at her as well, and now and again she heard someone shout out for Stannis or Margaery. Dany, however, is widely loved by the freedmen, who see her as their savior and refuse to accept any authority that isn't hers. Is it true? A freedwoman shouted. Is our mother dead? No, 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 Reznak screeched. Queen Daenerys will return to Meereen in her own time in all her might and majesty. Until such time, his worship King Hisdar shall... He is no king of mine, a freedman yelled. Men began to shove at one another. Daenerys Targaryen was wed, the guards on the pens had told them, laughing. She had taken a Meereenese slaver as her king, as wealthy as he was noble, and when the peace was signed and sealed, the fighting pits of Meereen would open once again. Other slaves insisted that the guards were lying, that Daenerys Targaryen would never make peace with slavers. Misa, they called her. Someone told him that meant mother. Soon the Silver Queen would come forth from her city, smash the Yunkai and break their chains, they whispered to one another. Cersei believes herself to be the sole authority and thinks that she does not need advice or counsel, only servants. A weak ruler needs a strong hand, as Aerys needed father. A strong ruler requires only a diligent servant to carry out his orders. While Dany relies on counsel from other people and additionally believes that as a queen, she should not only listen to high-born educated lords, but also the people themselves. A queen must listen to all, she reminded him. The high-born and the low, the strong and the weak, the noble and the venal. One voice might speak you false, but in many there is always truth to be found. She had read that in a book. When councils are concerned, Cersei is not willing to follow them anyway because she distrusts everyone and everything. Wyman Manderley was a loyal bannerman to Eddard Stark, said Grandmaster Pycelle. Can such men be trusted? No man can be trusted. On the other hand, while Dany has a healthy dose of mistrust, she is not willing to throw every advice away and only trust herself. It seems to me that the queen who trusts no one is as foolish as the queen who trusts everyone. Every man I take into my service is a risk. I understand that. But how am I to win the Seven Kingdoms without such risks? Most of Cersei's tenure in King's Landing is dedicated to fighting against the Tyrells, her own allies. In order to get rid of them, she convinces herself that Margaery is not really a virgin like she claims, and wants her to be apprehended by the Faith on suspicion of adultery. In order to get proof, she tortures the Blue Bard until she gets a false confession to confirm her suspicions. Favor, Qyburn chuckled. Is that what women call it now? I fear you found too much of it, my friend, and from the wrong queen. The true one stands before you. Yes, Cersei blamed Margaery Tyrell for this. If not for her, Wat might have lived a long and fruitful life, singing his little songs and bedding piggers and crofters' daughters. Her scheming forced this on me. She had soiled me with her treachery. By dawn the singer's high blue boots were full of blood, and he had told them how Margaery would fondle herself as she watched her cousins pleasuring him with their mouths. At other times he would sing for her, whilst she sated her lusts with other lovers. Who were they, the queen demanded, and the wretched Wat named Sir Talad the Tall, Lambert Tanbury, Jalabar Jo, the Red Wine Twins, Osney Kettleback, Huck Clifton, and the Knight of Flowers. Daenerys also resorts to torture at one point, but for entirely different reason, to find out who keeps killing her people. The queen flinched. R'hllona Rhee had played the harp as sweetly as the maiden. When she had been a slave in Yunkai, she had played for every highborn family in the city. In Meereen she had become a leader among the Yunkish freedmen, their voice in Dany's councils. We have no captives but the wine cellar. None, this one grieves to confess. We beg your pardon. Mercy, thought Dany. They will have the dragon's mercy. Shagas, I have changed my mind. Question the man sharply. I could question the daughters sharply, whilst the father looks on. That will wring some names from him. Do as you think best, but bring me names. Her fury was a fire in her belly. After finding out that her father has died, Cersei faces an uncomfortable truth about him, but she chooses to deny it. And how shall I deal with the girl, your grace? Girl! Cersei had overlooked the second body. She strode to the bed, flung aside the heap of bloody coverlets, and there she was, naked, cold and pink, save for her face, which had turned as black as Job's head at his wedding feast. A chain of linked golden hands was half buried in the flesh of her throat, twisted so tight that it had broken the skin. Cersei hissed like an angry cat. What is she doing here? We found her there, your grace, said Shorter. It's the imp's whore. As if that explained why she was here. My lord father had no use for horse, she thought. After our mother died, he never touched a woman. She gave the guardsman a chilly look. This is not. When Lord Tywin's father died, he returned to Casterly Rock to find a woman of this sort, but decked in his lady mother's jewels, wearing one of her gowns. He stripped them off her, and all else as well. For a fortnight she was paraded naked through the streets of Lannisport, to confess to every man she had met that she was a thief and a harlot. That was how Lord Tywin Lannister dealt with whores. He never. This woman was here for some other purpose, not for. Daenerys, however, is willing to learn the uncomfortable truth about her father. Your father is called the Mad King in Westeros. Has no one ever told you? Viserys did, the Mad King. The usurper called him that. The usurper and his dogs. The Mad King. It was a lie. Why ask for truth? Sir Barristan said softly, if you close your ears to it. He hesitated, then continued. I told you before that I used a false name so the Lannisters would not know that I had joined you. That was less than half of it, your grace. The truth is, I wanted to watch you for a time before pledging you my sword, to make certain that you were not my father's daughter. If she was not her father's daughter, who was she? Mad, he finished. But I see no taint in you. A knight of the king's guard is in the king's presence day and night. For that reason our vows require us to protect his secrets as we would his life. But your father's secrets by rights belong to you now, along with his throne, and I thought perhaps you might have questions for me. Questions? She had 100 questions, 1,000, 10,000. Why couldn't she think of one? Was my father truly mad? She blurted out. Why do I ask that? Viserys said this talk of madness was a ploy of the usurpers. Viserys was a child, and the queen sheltered him as much as she could. Your father always had a little madness in him, I now believe. Yet he was charming and generous as well, so his lapses were forgiven. His reign began with such promise. But as the years passed, the lapses grew more frequent, until... Dany stopped him. Do I want to hear this now? Sir Barristan considered a moment. Perhaps not. Not now. Not now, she agreed. One day you must tell me all, the good and the bad. There is some good to be said of my father, surely. And my father? Was there some woman he loved better than his queen? Sir Barristan shifted in the saddle. Not loved. Perhaps wanted is a better word, but it was only kitchen gossip, the whispers of washerwomen and stable boys. I want to know. I never knew my father. I want to know everything about him, the good and the rest. As you command. The White Knight chose his words with care. Prince Aerys, as a youth, he was taken with a certain lady of Casterly Rock, a cousin of Tywin Lannister. When she and Tywin wed, your father drank too much wine at the wedding feast, and was heard to say that it was a great pity that the lord's right to the first night had been abolished. A drunken jape, no more, but Tywin Lannister was not a man to forget such words, or the liberties your father took during the wedding. His face reddened. I have said too much, your grace. One queen is willing to kill children to satisfy her pride. Another queen is horrified at the prospect of children dying, even if it would benefit her. I know quite a lot. Not enough to save the child, it would seem. Alas, no. There was another bastard, a boy, older. I took steps to see him removed from harm's way, but I confess I never dreamed the babe would be at risk. A base-born girl, less than a year old, with a whore for a mother. What threat could she pose? She was Robert's, Tyrion said bitterly. That was enough for Cersei, it would seem. I've also heard whispers that Robert got a pair of twins on a serving wench at Casterly Rock 3 years ago when he went west for Lord Tywin's tourney. Cersei had the babes killed and sold the mother to a passing slaver. Too much an affront to Lannister pride, that close to home. When Dany's dragon kills a child, she is distraught. As revenge for the killings conducted by the Sons of the Harpy, she asks for a child from every noble house of Meereen, promising that the children will be killed if the murders continue. Yet the murders continue and Dany cannot bring herself to harm the kids. Dany pushed her foot about her plate. She dare not glance over where Grazer and Keza stood, for fear that she might cry. The shave pet has a harder heart than mine. They had fought about the hostages half a dozen times. The Sons of the Harpy are laughing in their pyramids. Shakat said just this morning, "What good are hostages if you will not take their heads?" In his eyes she was only a weak woman. Hazea was enough. What good is peace if it must be purchased with the blood of little children? These murders are not their doing, Dany told the Green Race, feebly. I am no butcher queen. This also doubles as a small anti-parallel. The second half of Dany's entire arc is about ending slavery, while Cersei allegedly sold Robert's mistress into slavery. Cersei relishes in destruction. Lord Hallion has assured me that his pyromancies can control the fire. The Guild of Alchemists had been brewing fresh wildfire for a fortnight. Let all of King's Landing see the flames. It will be a lesson to our enemies. Now you sound like Aerys. Dany wants to avoid distraction. Dany had no wish to reduce King's Landing to a blackened ruin full of unquiet ghosts. She had supped enough on tears. Cersei is narcissistic. Cersei glanced past Tommen to where Margaery sat laughing with her father. She is pretty enough, she had to admit, but most of that is youth. Even peasant girls are pretty at a certain age, when they are still fresh and innocent and unspoiled, and most of them have the same brown hair and brown eyes as she does. Only a fool would ever claim she was more beautiful than I. The world was full of fools, however. So was her son's court. Peace on your prophecy, old woman. The little queen may be younger than I, but she has never been more beautiful, and soon she will be dead. Dany is humble. Reznak Moreznak bowed and beamed. Magnificence. Every day you grow more beautiful. I think the prospect of your wedding has given you a glow. Oh, my shining queen. Dany sighed. Simon the first petitioner. Are there any anti-parallels that you noticed that I missed? Tell me in the comments. It is assumed that one of the queens that we discuss is on the path of madness solely because she is the daughter of a king who was widely considered to be mad. Yet she displays none of his erratic behaviors while the other one does. Cersei and Aerys are compared and paralleled to each other so much in so many different ways that one has to read the books with their eyes closed to not see it. There exists a tinfoil theory according to which Jaime and Cersei may in fact be Aerys' biological children, given his infatuation with Joanna Lannister and the liberties he supposedly took during the bedding ceremony. I do not have an opinion on this theory, I mentioned it because it seems relevant and I will henceforth discuss Cersei and Aerys as standalone, unrelated characters and, if applicable, compare their behavior to Dany's behavior. Both Aerys and Cersei have delusions of grandeur. Aerys II did not lack for ambition. Upon his coronation, he decided that it was his wish to be the greatest king in the history of the Seven Kingdoms, a conceit certain of his friends encouraged by suggesting that one day he might be remembered as Aerys the Wise or even Aerys the Great. The Lord of Casterly Rock deserved rainbows. He had been a great man. I shall be greater, though. 1,000 years from now, when the Maesters write about this time, you shall be remembered only as Queen Cersei's sire. Dany never thinks of herself in this manner. A thing Dany is often mocked for is that she has many different titles, but what is lost on people is that these titles are given to her by others. For example, she is called Misa by the people she freed, the Unburned, and the Mother of Dragons by her Khalasar. She does not bestow greatness on herself, it is other people who point out her greatness. Both Aerys and Cersei are caught by the throne. In the case of Cersei, this only happens in a dream, but it's important that this is the very first thing that happened in the first POV chapter. Aerys was cut by the throne so much that he was called King's Cap. The throne cutting a monarch is usually considered to be a sign of rejection, of unfitness to rule. The throne cut Viserys and even Aegon the Conqueror on one occasion, and it is very likely that it killed Maegor the Cruel. The most glaring parallel between Cersei and Aerys, however, is that both are obsessed with wildfire. Aerys even developed a sexual fetish for it. By 2080 AC, Aerys II had taken to burning traitors, murderers, and plotters rather than hanging or beheading them. The king seemed to take great pleasure in these fiery executions, which were presided over by Wisdom Rosard, the Grand Maester of the Guild of Alchemists. Even in the baleful glow, Cersei had been beautiful to look upon. She had stood with one hand on her breast, her lips parted, her green eyes shining. She is crying, Jaime had realized, but whether it was from grief or ecstasy he could not have said. The sight had filled him with disquiet, reminding him of Aerys Targaryen and the way a burning would arouse him. A king has no secrets from his Kingsguard. We never see Dany interact with wildfire, and Dany executes someone by fire only twice. Mirri Maz Duur, because her life is needed to wake the dragons out of stone, and then Krazn's Monaclos to free the Unsullied. Dany does not derive pleasure from it, sexual or otherwise, and positive emotions during the ritual are from cherishing fire as a force of life itself, not due to the fact that she is killing someone. Her thoughts about fire are directly mirrored by the thoughts of George R.R. Martin himself. Fire is love, fire is passion, fire is sexual ardor, and all these things. Both Aerys and Cersei develop paranoia. So profound was his grace's joy that it seemed to restore him to his old self once again, but Prince Jaehaerys died later that same year, plunging Aerys into despair. In his black rage, he decided the babe's wet nurse was to blame and had the woman beheaded. Not long after, in a change of heart, Aerys announced that Jaehaerys had been poisoned by his own mistress, the pretty young daughter of one of his household knights. The king had the girl and all of her kin tortured to death. During the course of this torment, it is recorded, all confessed to the murder, though the details of their confessions were greatly at odds. The birth of Prince Viserys only seemed to make Viserys II more fearful and obsessive, however. Though the new young princeling seemed healthy enough, the king was terrified lest he suffer the same fate as his brothers. Kingsguard knights were commanded to stand over him night and day to see that no one touched the boy without the king's leave. Even the queen herself was forbidden to be alone with the infant. When her milk dried up, Aerys insisted on having his own food taster suckle at the teats of the prince's wet nurse, to ascertain that the woman had no smeared poison on her nipples. As gifts for the young prince arrived from all the lords of the Seven Kingdoms, the king had them all piled in the yard and burned, for fear that some of them might have been ensorcelled or cursed. Captivity at Duskendale had shattered whatever sanity had remained to Aerys II Targaryen. From that day forth, the king's madness reigned unchecked, growing worse with every passing year. The Darklands had dared lay hands upon his person, shoving him roughly, stripping him of his royal raiment, even daring to strike him. After his release, King Aerys would no longer allow himself to be touched, even by his own servants. Uncut and unwashed, his hair grew even longer and more tangled, whilst his fingernails lengthened and thickened into grotesque yellow talons. He forbade any blade in his presence, save for the swords carried by the knights of his Kingsguard, sworn to protect him. His judgments became ever harsher and crueler. Once safely returned to King's Landing, his grace refused to leave the Red Keep for any cause and remained a virtual prisoner in his own castle for the next 4 years, during which time he grew ever more wary of those around him, Tywin Lannister in particular. His suspicions extended even to his own son and heir. Prince Rhaegar, he was convinced, had conspired with Tywin Lannister to have him slain at Duskendale. They had planned to storm the town walls so that Lord Darklyn would put him to death, opening the way for Rhaegar to mount the Iron Throne and marry Lord Tywin's daughter. He is in the walls. He killed father as he killed mother, as he killed Joff. The dwarf would come for her as well, the queen knew, just as the old woman had promised her in the dimness of that tent. She knew Joff was too strong for her, Cersei thought, remembering the gold coin Qyburn had found. For House Tyrell to hope to rule, he had to be removed. It came back to her that Margaery and her hideous grandmother had once plotted to marry Sansa Stark to the little queen's crippled brother Willas. Lord Tywin had forestalled that by stealing a march on them and wedding Sansa to Tyrion, but the link had been there. They are all in it together, she realized with a start. The Tyrells bribed the Gaolers to free Tyrion and whisk him down the Rose Road to join his vile bride. By now the both of them are safe in Highgarden, hidden away behind a wall of roses. Well, some of Cersei's suspicions are right. For example, that the Tyrells were involved in killing Joffrey, they remain her allies and she alienates them, causing instability just like Aerys was alienating Tywin, believing him to have ulterior motives, and conspiring with Rhaegar, who must also be out to get him, of course. In contrast, while Dany has her doubts about the loyalty of some of her people, she nevertheless believes that a queen who trusts everyone is as foolish as the one who trusts no one and is not paranoid. It's likely not a coincidence either that Aerys and Cersei both fear being replaced by a younger, more popular person, Rhaegar and Margaery, as well as the fact that the descent into paranoia is kick-started by the death of their children. In the case of Cersei, the death of Joffrey; in the case of Aerys, Rhaella's numerous miscarriages and other pregnancy problems. Aerys and Cersei both resolve to unnecessary cruelty and torture people for their own personal goals or simply out of cruelty. Aerys began to surround himself with informers, paying handsome rewards to men of dubious repute for whispers, lies, and tales of treasons, real and imagined. When on such reported that the captain of the Hunt's personal guard, a knight named Sir Ilyn Payne, had been heard boasting it was Lord Tywin who truly ruled the Seven Kingdoms, his grace sent the Kingsguard to arrest the man and had his tongue ripped out with red-hot pincers. When Darkon and his family were presented to him in chains, Aerys demanded their deaths, and not only Darkon's immediate kin, but his uncles and aunts and even his distant kinsmen in Duskendale. Even his good kin, the Hollards, were attainted and destroyed. Only Sir Simon's young nephew, Dontos Hollard, was spared, and only then because Sir Barristan begged that mercy as a boon, and the king he had saved could not refuse him. As to Lady Serala, hers was a crueler death. Aerys had the laced serpent's tongue and her womanly parts torn out before she was burned alive. Yet her enemies say that she should have suffered more and worse for the ruin she brought down upon the town. The queen took Qyburn aside and told him of Sir Balman's folly. I cannot have Fallis spreading tales about the city. Do you still need women for your work? I do, your grace. The puppeteers are quite used up. Take her and do with her as you will then. But once she goes down into the black cells, need I say more? No, your grace, I understand. Dany has never executed someone or tortured someone on a whim. There is a scene in A Dance with Dragons when someone spits on her, but she lets him go. If this was Cersei or Aerys, such a slight would not go unpunished. Both Cersei and Aerys surround themselves with sycophants. He was also vain, proud, and changeable, traits that made him easy prey for flatterers and lickspittles, but these flaws were not immediately apparent to most at the time of his ascension. Lord Tywin accordingly surrendered his chain of office and retired from court, returning to Casterly Rock with his daughter. The king replaced him as Hand with Lord Owen Merryweather, an aged and amiable lickspittle, famed for laughing loudest at every jape and witticism uttered by the king, no matter how feeble. My counsellors. Cersei had uprooted every rose, and all those beholden to her uncle and her brothers. In their places were men whose loyalty would be to her. She had even given them new styles, borrowed from the free cities. The queen would have no masters at court beside herself. Orton Merryweather was her justiciar. Giles Rosby her lord treasurer. Aurain Waters, the dashing young bastard of Driftmark, would be her grand admiral. In contrast, Dany welcomes everyone to advise her, even her enemies and people she distrusts and dislikes, precisely because she believes that a queen must listen to all, and that she must have a healthy dose of mistrust, to not believe everything everyone is saying, but also to not distrust everyone either. Aerys gave the handship to a pyromancer, Rosard, while Cersei thinks of a possibility to give handship to another pyromancer, Halyn. And finally, my favorite, Aerys and Cersei both wanted to build a city out of white marble. If there are any parallels between Cersei and Aerys that I missed, let me know in the comments. Cersei and Daenerys are two characters I love immensely despite how different they are. I adore Cersei because she is so evil and screwed up, and I love Daenerys precisely because she does good things in a world where nobody even tries. There is one thing that these two women have in common, and I suppose that this is why I love them in spite of their differences. They refused to let themselves be defined by the abuse they faced from men. It hurts me that the only two women in this series who actually rule in their own right are so widely dismissed as identical, mad, hysterical, tyrannical harpies, destined for the same fate of dying at the hands of their intimate partners, their corpses used to prop up their happiness. Thanks for watching. Remember to comment on other parallels and anti-parallels you found between Cersei, Dany and Aerys. And if you like this video, please leave a like, subscribe and share so that more people can see it. Make sure to click the notification button so that you never miss a new video.